The second section of Here Lies is called The Grand Pause. Uh, it's actually a musical term. I found it in a book by, I'm going to mispronounce it, John Biguinet. He's a poet and also a short story writer. And Bloomsbury has this series of little books about either objects or concepts. So he wrote a whole book about silence. And here's a quote from that. The grand pause, indicated by a fermata above a rest, extends the silence at the performer's discretion. One composer has even employed the grand pause on his tombstone. So since I was writing about death, that just seemed great as a section title. And basically, I thought if every single poem in the book started or was implied to start, Here Lies Tom C. Hunley, that just wasn't enough variety. So the second section, the poems have titles. They're still about death. This one's called Surrounded by Aliens. Who isn't a baby in a blanket thrown out the window of a burning house? Who isn't a bamboo kite about to be torn to pieces by a living feathered kite? Who isn't a windstorm embarrassed to ask for directions but also afraid to subside? Tom C. Hunley lies in a hospital bed surrounded by aliens. His family and friends, but from a different world from the one where he lies, snapped like branches and then burned like branches and then overwhelmed like a small flame by the soothing music of rain. He's not gone or quite still here, but in between, like all of us always in between. Who isn't a house with many rooms, all of them hallways? Who isn't surrounded by aliens, wondering why war looks like love, why love looks like war? Hello, hello, says the nurse like a question spat into a telephone while she touches him and he hears but can't tell her. Her touch makes him feel too much, like food that cries each time it's bitten, in a voice like a dog whistle, and so ouch, so much ouch, but the nurse's beauty stings a sunset scene from a prison cell.
Very nice. That was Surrounded by Aliens from Here Lies.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, a different poem I was reading, it ends on, it's a poem about, I remember which one it was, but it was about one of the most embarrassing things in your life, probably, the throwing up in front of your school class, remember?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it ends about how amused you were by it. And then it says, the world a toy he finally learned to enjoy, you know? And I just feel like every time I read your poems, there's so much enjoyment in them. Do you have like a philosophy for writing that includes that? Like, what do you think of, what is your job as a poet? And is that, how does that all tie together?
I don't know. I did study. I made a point out of studying with David Kirby at Florida State because he was funny and serious. You know, I remember him saying that he wanted not poems that were more funny, but poems that were more full. So if a poem was really sad, he wanted to have some checkpoints that were also funny. And if he had a funny poem, he also wanted some points where it turned dark. So I'm really influenced by that idea. I mean, I kind of had an inkling of that idea before I studied with him. I sought him out after reading several of his books. I said, this is the guy I got to learn from. He actually taught a tutorial on poetry and humor. And I remember him saying how annoying he thought it was that if your poems have humor in them, a lot of times people don't take them seriously, you know, and that humorous poets don't win the big prizes. He said there's this attitude that, like, if you say the war in such and such a place is bad, that's profound, you know. Well, it's not profound. We already know that, you know. But anyway, humor for me has been, you know, sometimes a defense mechanism and not always healthy. You know, sometimes I can be flippant and whatnot. I need to check that in my poems. But humor is an important part of how I face life. And some of my newer poems are dark a lot. You know, I mean, I wrote a whole book about my death. You know, it's going to be dark. But hopefully it's dark humor. It's darkness checked by humor, humor checked by darkness, and it's just how I really face life and am in everyday life.